facing a period of deep insecurity, energy insecurity, climate insecurity, and of course jobs insecurity. And the government says, oh, we can't afford to deal with that. But we can afford to find £1 trillion to bail out the banks. So it's like saying we can't afford to survive.
It feels like it's like a knee-jerk reaction to a problem, and it hasn't been well thought out.
It's estimated that about 25 billion a year is lost to corporate tax avoidance.
Very few people would welcome cuts, and it's not something that anyone wants. There is, broadly speaking, a consensus in government that there is a need for cuts. The question is, what do you cut, and how do you do it in a way that doesn't remove basic services from people?
My name's Ricky Jones. I've spent 25 years working in education in Hackney. The youth service in Hackney has been slashed not in half, but into a quarter. And what does that do? That makes our children end up on the streets.
We've occupied Mess Street because we're protesting against the cuts in Hackney. Hackney is one of the poorest boroughs in the country, and they're going to be making cuts, which is ridiculous. Stuff happens in these areas because it's poor. Like you don't get Stubbins and you don't get Robbins in Muswell Hill or Highgate. Like cutting youth centres, cutting nurses, cutting schools and places like this is just going to destroy. People are going to have to pay so much more because of the cuts. Like it doesn't make sense.
Looking at the smaller picture, we're seeing lots of false economies. For instance, if a health promotion programme is cut and this leads to people needing more serious health care later on, then that, in a very literal way, is a false economy. If the government then pursues policies that are going to continue to dampen the economy, which is what they're doing by cutting spending and putting more people out on the dole, it makes the situation worse. They may be making cuts, but we're also cutting the amount of money coming into the state at the same time. So that's why it's a false economy.
I mean, I agree that, you know, there's a hole and you've got to be financially responsible. Well, I think we're all agreed on that. I think what's interesting about the movement is that people are actually talking about this and engaging and saying, well, actually there is a way forward.
There wouldn't be a need for any cuts. UK Uncut is focusing on the fact that there are alternatives. The amount that Vodafone avoided was estimated around 6 billion. That's enough money to prevent any of the cuts to any of the local authorities all across the country happening. We're calling to the government to crack down on these loopholes and stop letting these big businesses off tax that they should be paying.
When the recent tax on bankers' bonuses was introduced and everyone said the bankers are going to leave, they didn't. So the idea that everyone who's got any money is clamouring to leave isn't actually true. The super rich are, in fact, coming into the UK and into London in particular, partly attracted by relatively low rates of taxation.
All of the UK Uncut actions have been peaceful, non-violent demonstrations. The idea is that you can upload your own action, say where you're going to be, say what you're going to do, and there's guidance on the website how to set up your own action. There's been one-woman protests that have been largely pensioners. They've been inspired and they've taken it on themselves.
That's what's been so inspiring about this whole, you know, for instance, an organisation like UK Uncut. It's in such a positive way, it's not negative. You know, turning a high street bank into a creche or a drama group is brilliant.
The Robin Hood tax is as simple and as brilliant as it may appear to you. The suggestion is you place a tiny tax on the speculative banking to the tune of 10 pence every £1,000. If adopted worldwide, it would generate, at a conservative estimate, something in the region of £250 billion every 12 months. In UK terms, it would be 20 billion. We are not a bunch of hippies. This is not some airy-fairy thing. There is a financial structure. Nothing to do with the high street bank. No individual is taxed. This is not charity. Nobody's asking for your money, for anybody's money. This is simply to get a section of the community which is currently untaxed to become valuable. There are lots and lots of people who will tell you that the Robin Hood tax is a sort of pipe dream. No, it's not. The Germans have already budgeted for it next year, as have the French. There will be a transactional tax in both Germany and France, two of the biggest economies in Europe. If anyone tells you that it's too complicated, it's electronic. Tell them to relax, because they won't be doing it. You know, if you say that you're going to put a man on Jupiter, they say, Jesus, will it be on TV? They don't say, well, that's kind of difficult. How's that going to work? There's a lot of corruption out there in this scientific circle. They don't say that. They only reach for those phrases when it comes to, for some mystifying reason, when it comes to trying to help people who are in trouble. There is nothing more complicated about it than that.
I heard a Tory MP say on the Environment Committee the other day, Tim Yeo, that not investing in dealing with climate change was a bit like not investing in Spitfires in 1937. In 1945, we had a deficit of 245% of GDP, i.e. 245% of our income. Today, our deficit is edging up towards 70% of GDP, a hell of a lot lower than it was in 45. In 45, a Labour government began to build a National Health Service, it banked public housing, it invested in education, it started building the transport sector, and the deficit just fell like this until the 1950s and 60s, when it more or less disappeared and wasn't an issue. And why? Because when you invest in the economy, you get the Bank of England to give you the credit at a very low rate of interest. You invest it in the economy, people get jobs, they start paying taxes back to the government.
There are a range of really serious problems facing us at the moment, and if we're clever about it, we can solve them all with one solution, and that is an amazing opportunity. The answer is to find a way of reconciling, of reuniting the market with the environment. If we invest in a new type of economic development, a new kind of type of economic growth, we will create jobs and we'll create ecological stability. The Green New Deal is a combination of some of the things that are already happening.
So Greens, economists like ourselves, trade unionists, an unlikely group of people, we came round a table to decide and to discuss what was needed to face the triple crunch of peak oil, climate change and financial crisis.
By investing in green technologies and green jobs, you are both sowing the seeds of the future for the economy and at the same time tackling climate change.
I'd really strongly encourage people to get out on the streets. This has been a really effective campaign. The government and big corporations are listening.
A good example of that is the plan to sell off the forests, which was hugely controversial. And despite the fact that it was a majority of people who voted in Parliament for that sale, the government nevertheless did a U-turn, and it did that because of the public reaction.
In the end, over 500,000 of us signed the petition. Over 100,000 of us emailed our MPs, we clubbed together to run adverts in the papers and to pay for opinion polls. And together all these things kind of created a real storm, and we shifted the government from a position where they were saying there is no alternative to this, shut up, we're going to do it, whatever you say, to a position where they said, sorry, we've got this wrong and changed the policy.
Foster the positive side of it, your actual movement is so much stronger.
Basically, I'm here, not just for me, but for everyone.
We need to make it clear that we want change.
If we all come together, if enough of us get involved, we really can stop bad things happening, make good things happen instead.
It's achievable, you simply have to do it. If it's complicated, so what?
If you don't fight for yourself, you can't expect anyone else to do it for you.